Charles, thanks for joining us today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We if you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, we're running the gambit on meeting with folks that I've met through the previous gym that I used to go to. So Charles, that's how him and I connected, and I follow him closely. It's been fun to watch your success, man, and I love reading. I'm a little behind. I'm not gonna lie, full transparency, but I'm a little behind on the daily blog. But I do love keeping up with it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean it's a lot. It's a fire hose of stuff. So I don't blame you.
Yeah, so maybe maybe let's just start there just to give some context. Like, you know, um, who are you? What do you do? And since we're on the topic of the blog, like, why is that important? Why do you feel that adds value?
Yeah, my name is Charles, and I am a designer at heart, but I'm also a brand strategist. So I help entrepreneurs essentially articulate their value both verbally and visually, so that the right people pay attention, the right people notice. And the daily blog, the daily email thing that I do is really just a daily practice to keep me really in the work and to articulate my own thoughts and findings and beliefs around the topic. Um, it's kind of it kills two birds with one stone. It puts my thinking out there, and it also helps me figure out what I believe. Like there's like no better way to, um, figure out what you believe than by writing. And it really makes you process your own approach, and that's really the purpose behind it. So it's kind of two things: it's marketing, and it's a way for me to develop my own expertise further. So
Yeah, and I think it's also great because it's like what, a 2 minute estimated read or something like that. It's always these short blurbs where, a lot of the newsletters that I get, whether it's a weekly, monthly, or or a day basis, like they're you long newsletters with different thought pieces and things like that that quite frankly, maybe I pick out a thing or two from them, but most of the time I'm just, you know, maybe glancing at it and moving on. But yours is just like quick, simple, to the point, and just reiterate. It's almost like a lot of times when you read like a self help book, for instance, right?
mhm.
The things that are talked about, you already know. A lot of times, like when you're, the points that are brought up, like they're just bringing it to the forefront of your mind and allowing you to think about it, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I found that I really say the same thing a lot, but I I explain it in different ways,
Yeah.
like with different examples, and really pretty much every single day it's something that came up that day, whether it's with a client or with my own marketing, or something that I'm pulling from that is actually happening.
Hmm.
And uh, and the hope is that whatever that outcome is, or whatever the strategy is that we land on, can be helpful to people that subscribe as well.
Yeah.
So
How many subscribers are you up to now, if you don't mind me asking?
I think I'm sitting around 300 or 400.
That's
I
awesome,
try
man.
not to look at it too
Yeah,
much because it's a daily email. It's every
I
freaking
know.
day. So like,
Saturdays and Sundays, like
um,
nonstop.
oh yeah, yeah.
Write it? Do you write it every day, or do you plan it out, a week ahead in advance, or how do
So
you attack it?
so when I was getting started with it, my thought was like, all right, I'm going to be like a couple weeks ahead and just
Yeah.
schedule it out. But that it's every day now.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like almost forget about it. Like yesterday, I was like about to go to bed and I was like, oh, I didn't write the daily email. And so I just like literally yesterday, I just like looked through some correspondence that I had with clients and pulled something out of there that I thought could be useful to more people. So yeah, it's not an overwhelming read, and it's not overwhelming for me to write. Like
Yeah.
doing it every day sounds crazy, but it's actually been really fun. It's kind of like going to the gym or something, you know? It's like something to develop my own expertise and serve others at the same time. So
Yeah, well, I love it. And we'll circle back and talk about how to get in touch with Charles at the end of the episode as well. But since we're on the topic, if someone wants to check it out and get added to the blast, how do they do so?
yeah, it's platoon.studio/the-frontlines.
Okay, cool. Well,
So
pivoting.
that's what it's called. It's called the Frontlines is the
Nice.
title of the newsletter.
Well, since since we're here to talk branding, or that's what you do on a daily basis, let's kind of go through this. So, what is startup company entrepreneurial branding, and why is it important?
So everyone and everything, every business, and us all personally, we all have a brand. And like whether we put effort into it or not, like people, we have a reputation. And people that invest in branding are more mindful about the reputation that they want to have. And that's essentially what I'm helping people do is build reputations and create the things that influence that. So most often it's things like your logo, your name, your website, the style of photography that you choose to use, the media that you choose to put out, like this podcast, for example. The more of a grip that you can have on all that, the more intentional you can be with how you're perceived in the market. So that is essentially what I help people navigate, whether it's a startup or whether it's somebody that's, you know, recently acquired a brand and wants to refresh it and give it a whole new life, new audience. That's where I thrive.
So, would you say obviously you said it, we all have a quote unquote brand or reputation, but it allows you to
Mm-hmm.
be a little bit more in control to quote unquote write your own story, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Any logo that we put out there or the website that we have or the lack thereof tells a story.
Mm-hmm.
It gives somebody an idea of the value that we bring. And my goal is to not necessarily falsify anything and like make something look like something that it's not, but rather work directly with the founder, the person that is really creating the value, and help them create something visual or verbal, whether it's their messaging or something that can be leveraged to articulate that value to the right people.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. So we talk on here a lot, at least early on. I guess maybe some of the episodes lately haven't talked about it as much. And then we talk about it internally quite a bit about authenticity. So the way
Mm-hmm.
I look at it is you're trying to get to the root of the company's authenticity and then articulate that to their customers or their clients.
Exactly, exactly. And like these companies, they know it in their gut. Like when they see it, they know that it's right, you know? But a lot of people have a really hard time. A lot of my clients have a hard time of figuring out what that is and how to communicate it to somebody to create it, you
Mm-hmm.
know? It's easier said than done. It's a lot of people feel like they need to be something that they're not in order to get what they want, and that is totally not the case. It's a it's also an exercise in developing confidence in your own authenticity, like who you really are, and whenever you figure it out, whenever you can align like who you really are with your product, the thing that you're selling, and your customer, it's like magic. It's the coolest thing in the world. Like everything just kind of clicks.
Yeah. So let's walk through the process a little bit, right? Because in my mind, you're almost acting as some sort of therapist to get down to like the root of this authenticity. So we'll call it for the purposes of this exercise. So like how are you getting there? What kind of questions are you asking? What's the setting? Are you in an office? Are you, out in more of a creative space? Like what does that process look like?
Yeah. So the whole thing begins with like strategy, like figuring out like we need a solid plan before we can build the thing. It's like building a house. Like if you start trying to build a house without having like a clear blueprint of the thing that you're building, it's going to be the most expensive thing ever. It's going to be the longest, most headache inducing project of all time.
You're in the process of right now,
So
right?
really, oh, we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's luckily our builder is freaking amazing. So it's, we're good.
You
We're
don't hear
good.
too many people our
Um,
age building homes. So kudos to you for that. But anyway, I digress. Keep going.
yeah, that's a whole other podcast episode. But yeah, so the first thing that we need to do is just get on the same page. We need to align on what it is that we're doing and how we're going to communicate it to the audience. And that looks like a series of things, like a series of conversations. I have a lot of exercises that I can take people through to really help pull out that feeling that they're trying to create through their product or through their service that they offer, whatever it is. Um, and yeah, so really just creating a solid game plan that has like step by step, it has the style that we're going after. It has all the deliverables that we're looking for. It has a clear plan on how those deliverables are going to be leveraged. Um, and then after that, we just execute it. So it is really similar to building a house. It's like, you start with a plan, get a clear blueprint put together, and then you work with somebody that has all of the connections with all of these subcontractors and all these experts in their own fields to put it all together and kind of quality control and make sure that the thing that we're building is aligned with the plan that we put forth at the very beginning. Um, but yeah, there's a little bit of secret sauce in there too on how to pull out that that core value, that true value that the brand offers. And it's a little different for everyone. It's usually just conversations and a lot of back and forth. It's never a thing where I'm like, this is how you should look. It's always a collaboration, really.
Yeah. So these exercises that you're using to try to articulate this conversation, are those things that you've just learned over time? Are they, things that you were taught in more of like a class environment? Like how did you develop that skill?
Yeah, so it's kind of a mix. Yeah, I had some mentors over the years. Still have mentors that I'm pulling some of that stuff from. A lot of it was just tactics on getting on the same page with the client, and a lot of times earning their trust. You know, because their company, if I'm working with a founder, an entrepreneur, this thing that they're building is their baby,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm coming alongside them to like help them figure out what their baby looks like and sounds like and how it's perceived by everyone else. So it's a really intimate thing where we have to really marry our skill sets together. And yeah, a lot of those exercises I kind of pulled things from working with other agencies and creatives over the years. It was like, oh, that's a really great exercise. I'm going to borrow that for myself. Um, so it's a series of little, like we have a positioning exercise, which is all about figuring out the feeling that you create for somebody. Like a Ferrari creates a certain feeling for someone as opposed to like a Honda, you know? Um, and yeah, there's a ton of examples like that. You know, a Yeti cooler creates a certain feeling for somebody as opposed to like the knockoff Walmart brand,
Hmm.
you know? And yeah, there's some exercises that we can go through to figure out what that feeling is and then put together a plan on how we're going to create that feeling.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a tough position, I would say. I- you hear it said from a hiring perspective a lot of times that like no one's going to care as much about your company as what you do. Um, and I
Mm-hmm.
think in your position, not only are you working with founders and entrepreneurs that care deeply about this thing that they've created, um, but
Right.
now you're trying to articulate it to the world in a way that makes sense to the founder, because I imagine that it's insanely personal, and that two people could have the same product, but how they want to be seen, like you said, from a Yeti versus knockoff standpoint, is completely goes down to personal preference, if you will.
Yeah, it really does. A lot of it does come down to personal preference, and taste is a
Mm.
huge thing. Like, um, you know, everybody has different experiences that they're reminded of whenever they see something, right? And that's a unique thing that that I like to pull into that into developing what the feeling is and how it's communicated, and a lot of it is personal preference. Um, yeah, and helping people articulate that even to just the designers that are going to be making the thing.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if you've ever been through a logo design process, but you know that it can be a lot of back and forth if you're not clear at the very beginning on what the end goal is, you know.
Yeah, for sure. So then what are the some of the other qualities, that you're looking at? Obviously, value probably comes into play, personal preference, taste. What are some of the other things that you're really trying to get down to the root of, to be able to communicate more clearly?
Yeah, I mean, value is definitely at the crux of all of it. Um, Beyond that, I mean, it's getting clear on who the ideal customer is kind of step two, right? You know, before we can connect with the right person, we need to know who they are. So getting clear on the value that we offer, and then the next step is figuring out who is going to benefit from it most. A lot of brands, a lot of companies, and really the bigger that they get, it seems the more out of control it gets. And they try to create something for the audience as opposed to for themselves. And that sounds counterintuitive because you're giving value to the audience. But I really do believe that the best things are made from the founder, like from the founder's own taste, from the value that they offer, and then finding the best, the most ideal customers that are going to benefit from that most, as opposed to the other way around. And there's a lot of people that would argue with me on that, but uh, I've just seen it work all like very, very often. And with the internet, you know, you can find any audience.
Hmm.
You can find people that are very aligned with what you are interested in and what the value that you bring uniquely, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think it helps you stay true, to your authenticity, right? Which is incredibly important in today's day and age, in my
mhm.
opinion.
100%.
So how often then, someone brings you in, you're working on branding, you kind of find that ideal customer profile, come up with the qualities that you're trying to define and get those done, and things are going really well. What's your involvement then, going forward? How often are you evolving that? Because as we all know, the world is changing very quickly, and although you may have your ideal customer profile and the qualities that you're measuring today, those could very easily
Hmm.
change tomorrow. So how involved are you from an ongoing basis?
Yeah, so it's really a case by case thing. Um, and usually the way it works is I usually charge like a flat fee for the strategy portion of the project because I really don't know anything before we really get into it and dive deep together. And the outcome of that strategy process is the plan that I was talking about. And then as far as the implementation of the plan, sometimes it's something that my client can implement themselves with an internal team, and maybe I'm just available to make sure things are on track, you know. Sometimes it means me kind of stepping in as the director of the implementation on that. And, I'm pulling from my Rolodex of contacts like logo designer here, animator, website designer, developer, that kind of thing, to build a team to build it, to make everything real. And sometimes that lasts for, 3 to 6 to sometimes 12 months. Sometimes I negotiate and some kind of partnership with them. So most often that looks like a revenue share deal or a some kind of equity deal, and that's also case by case depending on what my ongoing involvement is. It's usually vested, to prove myself that I'm bringing value, and those are there's only a couple of those, um, but those are projects that you know really have the most fruitful relationships where I have some skin in the game,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, as far as my involvement on the implementation side and the ongoing side, it's really a case by case thing. It all just depends on what the goal is and if the relationship is good.
Yeah. So we've mentioned the word branding a couple of times, and I think it might be helpful to take a step back here and maybe define what is branding? How is it different, or is it different from marketing and public relations as well?
Yeah, yeah, they all kind of work together. Um, the way I think about it is branding is your brand is your reputation. Like your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Um, and marketing is connecting the brand with the audience. That's how I think about it. And public relations is a marketing tactic where you're putting out a press release or something to tell a certain story, to create a brand, to create a reputation. So that's kind of how I think about all of those. But the brand is really at the core. It's what your ideal customer believes to be true about you.
Yeah,
And we can do certain things to influence that.
I love that. So then let's pivot a little bit and talk about some companies or people that you think are doing it really well.
Yeah. So we talked about them a minute ago, but Yeti is kind of like the case study. I wrote an email a while ago. Um, Might have been before you were on the list. I don't know. But it was about how I think you've achieved maximum success when you can get a stranger, like someone that you don't know, to wear your logo on their forehead,
Mm-hmm.
because you've done it. Like you've created a brand that someone wants to be an ambassador of. They are clear on what it is that you do, even if they don't really know. They might think that if I wear a Yeti hat, people will think of me in this certain way, or this is how I see myself. That means that Yeti is doing it right, you know?
Yeah.
Like you don't see people walking around wearing a Ozark Trail hat, like that Walmart brand,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And yeah, I just think that they've done an amazing job of telling stories. And literally, like if you look at their YouTube channel, they have like 20 documentaries of just telling stories. It's not selling their product. It's telling a story, and they align that story with their brand. And when people see that, it creates that reputation of like, if I wear a Yeti hat, it means that I'm an outdoorsman. If I use Yeti products, it means that I use high quality things, and I this is who I am. And whenever they wear the hat, it's like, it's just a hat,
Yeah.
but it's a freaking logo on their forehead. So it's and there's a ton of brands like that. Patagonia is another one. I'm personally like an outdoors person myself, so those are the brands that are in front of me all the time. But Patagonia, talk about a company that sticks to their guns. I don't know if you've read Yvon Chouinard's book. If you haven't, I would definitely check it
I
out.
haven't, but it's on the list now.
Yeah, I think it's called Let My People Go Surfing or
Okay.
something. But it's kind of like a manifesto in a way. It's like sharing how he sees the world and how he's been able to realize that through entrepreneurship, which is like the coolest thing ever to me.
Yeah. So I love the example of Yeti because in that example, the hat is not their product, right? They're wearing
Oh
the
no,
hat
yeah,
as an extension of their appreciation for the product, which I think is pretty
right.
awesome. So you mentioned that in the book that the manifesto is how he is able to connect how he sees the world with his product. You are also an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur. Switching gears now to entrepreneurship. What has that experience been like for you? How is your product an extension of how you see the world?
Yeah. So for a long time, I was really just a designer. I would take orders and design the thing, whether it was a logo or a website or some kind of ad campaign or something. Entrepreneurship, I think, is having a point of view and having a world view of like the thing that you want to realize, the thing that you want to create. And the biggest brands, the most successful ones are the ones that have the biggest visions, and the people that have the guts to freaking do it and go after it. Like another example, honestly, somebody that has a really strong brand, not necessarily a Yeti or a Patagonia, but is, somebody like Trey at HDub. Like something special about what HDub has
Mm-hmm.
going over there. It's not necessarily done through their logo or their marketing, but it's just through the vision that he has and the actions that he's taking to realize that vision. And I mean, it just kind of works. It just happens. And there's like, I don't know if the gym's at capacity, but it's seems like it is.
Yeah, and it's a certain environment too. And so, if you're not familiar with what he's talking about, go back and listen to episode 1. He was literally the first person that I had on the podcast, for good reason as well. So definitely go check
Yeah.
out Trey's episode. But continue.
Yeah. But I just think that the people that have the biggest vision that can affect the most people, not for the sake of building a big thing, but naturally having a big vision and seeing a problem in the world that you want to help fix, and going after it. I think that is where all of the greatest things happen. And but for myself, I was freelancing for all of these agencies, these big agencies, and they were paying me pennies, and these brands were paying these agencies hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for these different projects. And I just saw how it was so mismanaged, and those brands and those companies were really paying the agency for a massive margin of error. And it's because there were so many people, like 100 people. Like it's really hard to have a big full service agency. And and I just saw such an opportunity to not do that, not try to build a big agency, but to create something that really serves the founder and the entrepreneur who is, you know, risking it all a lot of times to present themselves in the to the market in the best way possible. And just from my experience, I don't believe that the best way to do that is hiring a, 100-person agency to help you do that. It's really such an intimate thing that can happen between just two people.
Yeah.
So that is what I've gone all in on, and I've really enjoyed doing it.
What have been your pain points throughout this process, personally or professionally?
Yeah, realizing that not every client is right for me is a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same for all of my clients too. Like, if you're trying to speak to everyone, then you're not going to connect with anyone. And even though I like preach that, it's hard for me to swallow as well. And that's really like kind of a scarcity mindset in a way. Um, where I feel like I have to, or I used to feel like I had to create something that would serve everyone, or like kind of adhere to what client A wanted when client B wanted something completely different. And being okay with that was a challenge for me because it meant saying no to some big projects, that sure, in the short term, you get some cash in the bank and it's all great, but it was not aligned with the thing I was trying to build long term and the people that I really wanted to work with. And I would say that's been the biggest hurdle for sure. Just saying no to massive opportunities in pursuit of working with the right person.
Yeah. I love that. And I have a feeling I know the answer to the next question based on that, or, within the same realm anyway.
Mm-hmm.
To those that are listening that are entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs, what would be your one piece of advice?
I would say don't feel like you have to fit in and adhere to anyone else's expectations, but to get clear on the true value that you uniquely have to offer and do whatever it takes to get clear on that. And then find somebody to help you present it to the world,
Yeah,
or, figure out a way to do it yourself. Do whatever it takes.
man, that's perfect. Really, thank you for coming on today. I think that's just a natural way to end it. So, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, it's been great to watch your success from the outside. Um, and I look forward to any follow up conversations we might have and dive in deeper, maybe in another episode.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Super fun.
Yeah. Before I let you go, people want to get in touch. How do they do so?
So my website is platoon.studio. So www.platoon.studio. And yeah, pretty much go there. You can find everything there.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Charles. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.